Hello everyone, can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So let's begin. So just one quick announcement is that your midterm 1 is coming up in a little less than 2 weeks from now. It will be on 16th November, and the syllabus will include homeworks 1 and 2, and the material covered up to and including this Friday. So the last time we discussed a bit about induced norms and also introduced the spectral radius, not norm. And today we will continue this discussion about the spectral radius. Okay. So just to recall, so the spectral radius rho of A is defined to be the maximum magnitude eigenvalue of a matrix A. Okay, and we also saw that the spectral radius is a lower bound on any matrix norm. So if is a matrix norm, rho of A is less than or equal to norm of A is true for any matrix A. And in fact, if you go back and look at the proof, yeah. So in fact, so we saw that the spectral radius has this universality property that regardless of which matrix norm you choose, if you evaluate the norm of a matrix A, we are to the spectral radius of that matrix A. However, the spectral radius is not a norm, so we were looking at some other properties of this spectral radius, and so at the end of the previous class we were trying to show the following lemma, that so let A, B and C to the n cross n and epsilon be greater than 0, then there exists a matrix norm such that in other words, we can find a norm such that you can the norm of this particular matrix is as close to its spectral radius as you wish. Notice that if I mean this is for a specific matrix. So in other words, if I take a different matrix B, then it is not generally true that norm of B will also be between rho of A and rho of A plus epsilon. So only for this one matrix A, okay, you can find a matrix norm such that rho of A is the norm of A is between rho of A and rho of A plus epsilon. So for the proof of this, I said that we use this Schur triangularization theorem, which we will be proving much later in the course. So the first step is this. which says that any matrix A um, in C to the n cross n with eigenvalues lambda 1 through then there exists a unitary U and say C to the n cross n and upper triangular delta with delta I equal to lambda I such that A is equal to U Hermitian delta U. Okay, this is such a decomposition is possible for any n cross n matrix A. You can always find a unitary U and an upper triangular delta satisfying these properties. Now, we will set dt to be the matrix with t squared up to t power n on the diagonal and zeros everywhere else. And then for such a matrix, if I compute, for example, since I went through it a little bit quickly the previous class, let me just, so here I'll just say compute dt delta dt inverse, where delta is the upper triangular matrix you get by doing the Schur decomposition of this matrix A. So since I went through it a little bit quickly the previous class, let me just take a 3 cross 3 example and just show you how this works out. So dt is t squared t cube times this delta matrix will have lambda 1, lambda 2 and lambda 3 on the diagonal. It's upper triangular, so it will have zeros below the diagonal, and let's say it has delta 1 3 and delta 2 3 here. And then D, for a diagonal matrix, when you invert it, all the diagonal entries get inverted. So this is T inverse, T to the minus 2 and T to the minus 3 and zeros everywhere else. So if I do this, this is equal to, I'll multiply these two first. So it is T squared, T cube times, if you multiply this, you'll get lambda 1 T inverse, and this will be delta 1 2 T to the minus 2 and delta 1 3 T to the minus 3, and this entry will be 0, and lambda 2 T to the minus 2 and T to the minus 3, 0 0 lambda 3 T to the minus 3. Now if I complete this multiplication, I'll get, this will become lambda 1, then delta 1 2 T inverse, this times, then this times the first row will become delta 1 3 T to the minus 2, then 0 lambda 2 delta 2 3 T to the minus 1, 0 0 and lambda 3. So you can see that when you do such an operation, dt delta dt inverse, it will retain lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3 on the diagonal. The first off diagonal, the first, that is the super diagonal, the entries will all get multiplied by t inverse. The second off diagonal will get multiplied by t to the minus 2 and so on. So in general, what we have is that dt delta dt inverse is equal to lambda 1 zeros t inverse delta 1 2 all the way up to t to the minus n minus 1 delta 1 n lambda 2 up to lambda n on the diagonal, and this will be t inverse delta n minus 1 and n. So you can fill in the rest of the entries. So this is how it will look. So all the first off diagonal, the first super diagonal entries will get multiplied by t inverse, then t to the minus 2 all the way up to t to the minus of n minus 1. So basically, if I choose t very large, all these off diagonal terms can be made small enough. So specifically what we'll do is we'll choose t large enough such that the sum of the absolute values of all the off diagonal terms here is at most epsilon. Is less than or equal to epsilon. So what this means is that if we look at dt delta dt inverse and we consider its L1 norm, what is the L1 norm? It's the maximum column sum norm. So I will have to take the sum of the magnitudes of the entries in every column and see which column is giving me the biggest number, and that is this maximum column sum norm. So when I take the magnitude of the entries here, I get mod of lambda 1. Here I'll get mod lambda 2 plus mod of t inverse delta 1 2. But the sum of all these entries is at most epsilon. And so this one term in magnitude cannot, the magnitude of this one term, it cannot exceed epsilon. Okay, so that is also going to be smaller than epsilon. So this column, the L1 norm of this column can be at most mod of lambda 2 plus epsilon. The L1 norm of this column also can be at most mod of lambda 3 plus epsilon, because this is the sum of the magnitudes of just two terms, whereas we've already made sure that the sum of the magnitudes of all these terms is at most epsilon. So this quantity here will be at most just a second. And the maximum of all these lambdas is rho of A by definition. And so this is going to be at most rho of A plus epsilon. In other words, one of these columns is going to have the largest eigenvalue in magnitude. That largest eigenvalue plus the sum of all these terms together in magnitude is an upper bound on the maximum column sum norm of dt delta dt inverse. And so this is true. So that was the kind of key step in the proof. And so now the rest of it is kind of connecting the dots here. So if we define the norm So we'll consider dt u b u Hermitian dt inverse and maximum column sum norm. So we've already seen that if I take any invertible matrix and I consider S inverse AS, where the norm of S inverse AS, that is also a valid norm. So this is a valid matrix norm. So L1, this maximum column sum norm is a matrix norm, and this matrix dt or U Hermitian dt inverse, this matrix is an invertible matrix. So this is in fact a valid norm. Okay, so this is what I'll define. Then
Sir, can you please repeat? Hello, sir.
Hold on one second.
Okay, sir.
Volume is too low on my machine. Okay, yeah, please repeat your question.
Sir, can you please repeat why it is valid norm? I did.
So we have already seen that, okay, first of all, is a norm. And the second point is that given any norm, AS, S inverse AS is a valid norm. The only requirement is that S should be non-singular. But that is true here, because this I can always U Hermitian dt inverse B U Hermitian dt inverse. Okay, this is a theorem we stated and proved in the previous class. Okay, so this is a valid norm, and then if I compute under this norm what the norm of A is, so then for large enough T, we have norm of A is equal to the L1 norm of dt u. Now A itself I can write as U Hermitian delta U. This equals A U Hermitian dt inverse, the maximum column sum norm of this. But U Hermitian and U Hermitian are both the identity matrix. So I have dt delta dt inverse, which is less than or equal to rho of A plus epsilon, as we just showed here. And of course, for any norm, we've already seen that for any norm, this rho of A is a lower bound on the norm. We are done. I mean, that's all we wanted to show, which is that the norm of A is between rho of A and rho of A plus epsilon. These are the two things we wanted to show. Okay, so that is this result. So this completes the proof we started the previous class. So now we'll continue. Okay, so just one remark is that what this result shows is that rho of A is essentially the greatest lower bound for the values of all matrix norms of, for the value of all matrix norms of A. In other words, I can find a norm such that the norm of A is as close to rho of A as I wish, and so there is no way anybody else can find some other zeta of A or something which is bigger than rho of A, and such that no matter which norm of A I choose to evaluate, that will still be bigger than zeta of A. The rho of A is the biggest lower bound I can find on any possible matrix norm of A. Okay, now so the reason why we are looking at many of these are because ultimately when we use when we develop algorithms for optimization, we have to deal with matrices, and these matrices, you often end up with powers of these matrices, and you want to know whether your algorithm converges. And so sort of a fundamental question is whether a power k is something that converges as k gets large. So basically, let me maybe first say, give this definition. A matrix A, C to the n cross n, is said to be a convergent matrix if k tending to infinity of a power k equals 0. So this is the n cross n all 0 matrix. Okay. So this is a convergent matrix, and what we will be interested in is under what conditions can we say that a matrix A is going to be convergent. Obviously, you can imagine that in particular applications, you may not have a matrix A such that a power k goes to 0. But what we'll see is that by suitably scaling the matrix, you can ensure that the matrix will be a convergent matrix. What I mean by that is, if you scale a matrix, you know that all its eigenvalues also scale by the same amount. And so I can potentially scale a matrix such that all of its eigenvalues become smaller. And I can choose that scaling factor to be appropriate so that all its eigenvalues in magnitude get bounded between 0 and 1. And so then all its eigenvalues are less than 1. And what we'll see momentarily is that if so the scale matrix has a spectral radius which is less than 1, and if a matrix has a spectral radius less than 1, then it is convergent. That is what we will see. So just so let's get there. So we have the following lemma. It's going all over the place today for some reason. Okay, lemma. Let A be an n cross n matrix if there is a matrix norm such that is less than 1, then so what this means is that every entry of a power k will go to 0 as k goes to infinity. So we'll just quickly see. This is a one-line proof. It's just that if norm of A is less than 1, then norm of a power k by submultiplicativity is less than or equal to norm A power k, and this quantity is less than 1. So when you take it to a large enough power, this quantity will go to 0 as k goes to infinity. Okay, so basically what it says is that the norm of a power k is going to 0 as k goes to infinity, and this matrix A, now you can, I mean, there's various ways to argue it, but one way is that this is a matrix norm. You're taking a matrix norm of some matrix called B. Let's say B is equal to a power k. Then if the norm of this is a non-negative quantity, and this a power k is less than or equal to something that's going to 0. So as k gets large, the norm of this matrix is going to go to 0. And if the norm of the matrix goes to 0, by property of matrix norm, that the positivity property of a matrix norm, if the norm of a matrix goes to 0, it must mean that the matrix itself must be going to 0. So that's one way to argue it. The other way to argue it is to say that so a power k goes to 0 as k goes to infinity with respect to, this is something we saw again in a previous class, but with respect to this particular norm. But then a norm is also a vector norm on c to the n squared. Any matrix norm is also a vector norm on c to the n squared, and all vector norms on c to the n squared are equivalent. So what that means is that a power k goes to 0 in the sense of with respect to the infinity norm as well. Or norm infinity, which means that this is the maximum magnitude entry, which implies every entry of a power k converges to 0. So it was not quite a one-line proof, but nonetheless the core part of the proof is really this step here. Okay, now
Sir?
yeah.
Sir, what does this equivalent mean? Is it related to the homework assignment problem?
So what, yeah, it's yeah, there probably was a homework problem on this also, but it's a property that I discussed again in a previous class, that you can always bound, given a particular norm, you can bound any other norm in terms of that norm. So there are constants c small m and c capital M, such that the first norm is bounded between c small m times the second norm and c capital M times the second norm for any vector. And so instead of this some norm we've used here, we can instead replace that with this norm. And since an upper bound on this norm is going to go to 0, then the infinity norm must also go to 0, which means that every entry of a power k must go to 0.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So now we know that if there is a norm for which this is less than 1, then limit is 0. And we also have seen that rho of a is a lower bound on any possible norm. So obviously if rho of a is less than 1, I know that I can find a norm such that the norm of a is within rho of a plus epsilon. So if rho of a is strictly less than 1, then I can always find a norm under which the norm of a is strictly less than 1. And therefore, such a matrix will be convergent. So that is this lemma here. Let a and c to the n cross n then limit k going to infinity a power k equal to 0 if and only if rho of a is less than 1. So this is saying more than what I just said. It's an if and only if statement. But the other part is very easy. If a power k, if a power k goes to 0 as k goes to infinity, and and 0 not equal to x in c to the n is such that ax equals lambda x, then so this is one of the eigenvectors of the matrix. Then if I look at a power kx, this is just repeated multiplication of x with a. Each time I multiply, I'll get another lambda factor. So this is going to be lambda power k times x. And for this to go to 0, x is a non-zero fixed vector. So the only dependence on k is coming through lambda power k. And so this will go to 0 only if mod lambda is less than 1. So and this must hold for all eigenvalues of A. Which implies that rho of A is less than 1. Okay, so that's the if part. And for the converse, if rho of A is less than 1, then there is some norm such that norm of A is less than 1. Okay, and so this implies that by the previous lemma, limit k tending to infinity, a power k equals 0. So if rho of A is less than 1, then this limit a power k as k goes to infinity will be equal to 0. So that shows the other side. Okay. So I mentioned that in algorithms, we often want to consider scaled versions of matrices that will allow us to bound the entries of a matrix as you take higher and higher powers. And this is a corollary that helps us bound the size of the entries of a power k as k goes to infinity. So that's this corollary. Okay, so let k c to the n cross n and epsilon be some positive number. Okay, then there exists a constant c such that mod of a power k ijth entry is less than or equal to this constant c times rho of a plus epsilon power k for k equal to 1, 2, and ij being any entry. Okay, so that's the corollary. So what it says is that there's a way to, based on this row of A, you can bound the ijth entry of A power k in terms of some constant times rho of A plus epsilon power k. So proof is very simple again. These bounds come in very useful when you're analyzing the convergence behavior of algorithms. So suppose I define A tilde to be rho of A plus epsilon inverse times A. Okay, then I claim that rho of A tilde is less than 1. Why is this true? I just scaled every entry of this matrix A by rho of A plus epsilon inverse, and so the eigenvalues also get scaled by rho of A plus epsilon inverse, and in particular the largest eigenvalue in magnitude also gets scaled by rho of A plus epsilon inverse, and so the largest eigenvalue then in magnitude becomes rho of A divided by rho of A plus epsilon, which is going to be less than 1. So this has rho of A tilde less than 1, which means A tilde is a convergent matrix. That is A tilde power k goes to 0 as k goes to infinity. So one fundamental property of any convergent sequence. So now think of it as there is a sequence of matrices, and this sequence of matrices, which is A tilde square, A tilde cube, A tilde power 4, etc. This sequence of matrices are converging. I can also think of this as there are n squared sequences, each sequence corresponding to a distinct entry of this matrix A tilde, and all these n squared sequences are converging. One fundamental property of a convergent sequence is that every convergent sequence is bounded. So that means, in words, the entries of A tilde power k are bounded. So what bounded in turn means is that there exists some constant c greater than 0 such that mod A tilde ij, A tilde power k, ij is less than or equal to this constant c. And this is true for all k and for all ij. And so that implies, now I'll just remove the scaling that I applied and take the scaling factor to the other side. So that means that mod of A power k ij is less than or equal to this constant c times rho of A plus epsilon k for every k equal to 1, 2, etc. and for every ij equal to 1, 2 to n. Okay, Now, if you remember a few classes ago, we were discussing about invertibility of matrices, and we made a small remark that, let me just find that here. We said that in terms of convergence, if x is a scalar, okay, so let's say real or complex, and mod x is less than 1, then 1 minus x inverse can be expanded as 1 plus x squared plus etc. And we were asking the question of it suggests this kind of a formula that if I want to find I minus A inverse, I can write that as I plus A squared plus etc. And we asked, when is this valid? This is valid for mod x less than 1, and we said that this is true if norm of A is less than 1, and any matrix norm will do. And now we know that if rho of A is less than 1, then I can find a norm under which this condition will hold. And so the equivalent condition is that rho of A should be less than 1. So that's the next lemma. It's actually a corollary. So A in C to the n cross n is invertible if there is a matrix norm such that norm of I minus A is less than 1. If this condition is satisfied, then I can write A inverse is equal to sigma k equal to 0 to infinity I minus A power k. So notice that I wrote this in terms of A, but now I'm writing it in terms of I minus A. So effectively, you replace A by I minus A here, then this becomes A inverse, and this becomes I plus I minus A plus I minus A whole squared plus etc. And that's what this formula here says. And so, and this condition here gets replaced with norm of I minus A less than 1. So it's exactly what we said earlier. At that point, it was a conjecture, but now we are actually formally stating the result. So, given what we've seen so far, again, the proof is very simple. So, if this norm of A, I minus A, is less than 1, then the series sigma k equal to 0 to infinity I minus A power k converges. Why? So remember that I'm not just looking at I minus A power k here. I'm looking at the summation of such terms. So we've already seen that if the norm is less than 1, we go here. It's here. So we've already seen that if norm of A is less than 1, then limit A power k is 0. We've seen that. But what we are doing now is kind of adding up these A power k type of terms from k equal to 0 to infinity. And what we are saying here is that this kind of a summation, it actually converges. Let's say converges to some matrix C. Okay, that's because the entries of this matrix I minus A power k of I minus A power k are at most, that is, we just saw this result, that the magnitude of the entries of I minus A power k are at most some constant times rho of I minus A plus some small number epsilon power k. And since rho of I minus A is some number that is less than or equal to this norm of I minus A, which is less than 1, it means that there exists some small enough epsilon such that rho of I minus A plus epsilon is also less than 1, which then in turn implies that every entry of I minus A power k summation I minus A power k is convergent. Now, so now all I have to do is to show that whatever this thing converges to is actually A inverse. So that's very easy. So I just do A times whatever is supposed to be A inverse. So sigma k equal to 0 to n. So I'll take n terms and then make n go to infinity. I minus A power k. This is equal to, I'll write A as I minus A sigma k equal to 0 to n I minus A power k. Now if I expand this out, so I'll get I minus A squared, etc. when I multiply with I. But then I'll get also negative terms which will start with I minus A, and then you'll get I minus A squared, I minus A cube, and so on. That the first term, the first I minus A term will cancel the I minus A term I get when I multiply I with this summation here. So this is what is called a telescoping sum. So all the alternate terms will cancel off, and this is going to be equal to I minus A power n plus 1. And this I minus A power n plus 1 goes to 0, the 0 matrix, as n goes to infinity. So this converges to identity as n goes to infinity. So that's why when I do, that's why I minus A, this summation k equal to 0 to infinity I minus A power k will be equal to A inverse. So okay, so this is one lemma about how we can use the fact that the norm of I minus A is less than 1 to write A inverse as a series. But keep in mind that if norm of I minus A is greater than 1, it doesn't say anything about the invertibility of the matrix A. A could well be invertible even if norm of I minus A is greater than 1. You can easily see that. So obviously rho of A could be greater than 1. If rho of A is greater than 1, then every matrix norm of I minus, so let me actually To avoid confusion, let me write that note. A may be invertible. So this is a one-way result is all I'm trying to say. Even if I minus A is greater than 1 for all norms. So for example, rho of I minus A could be greater than 1. Okay, in which case every norm of I minus A will be greater than 1. But A invertible is possible. A very closely related result is something called the Banach lemma. And I like to state it because the proof is slightly different. So let B in C to the n cross n and be any operator norm. That is, it's induced by a vector norm. On C to the n cross n. If norm of B is less than 1, then I plus B is invertible. And one plus norm of B inverse less than or equal to norm of I plus B inverse is less than or equal to 1 minus norm of B inverse. So this is a lemma that allows you to bound the norm of I plus B inverse in terms of the norm of B. It's at least 1 plus norm of B inverse and at most 1 minus norm of B inverse. So we'll just quickly see how this is done. So contradictions. So suppose I plus B is not invertible. Then that means that there is a non-zero V in C to the n which lies in the null space. I plus B times V equals 0 because I plus B is a singular matrix. So if I expand this out, this means that BV equals minus V. So that means that there is at least one eigenvalue whose magnitude is 1. So that means the largest magnitude eigenvalue must also be greater than or equal to 1. So norm B is greater than or equal to 1 since this norm is actually an induced norm. Okay, so it's not because of eigenvalue being equal to 1 in magnitude, but because this is an induced norm.
Sir?
That means that, yeah, I'm just explaining this. So if BV equals minus V, this norm here, norm B, it's an operator norm. So this is actually equal to the max of, let's say, x not equal to 0 of norm, this whatever norm that induced this norm, Bx divided by norm x. Now, if I choose a particular value of this for this x, that will only give me a lower bound on this. So this is going to be greater than or equal to norm of bv over norm v, but bv equals minus v, so that is equal to norm of minus v over norm v, and norm of minus v is equal to norm v, and this is 1. So that's basically this claim here. But then this is a contradiction, because we started out by saying that if norm b is less than 1. So basically what that means is if norm b is less than 1, then I plus b must be invertible. Okay. Now for the last step, note that we know that any norm, for any norm, the norm of the identity matrix is at least equal to 1. This follows from the submultiplicativity of norms. In fact, for operator norms, these are equal. Okay, and this is in turn less than or equal to the norm of I plus b times I plus b inverse, which is less than or equal to the norm of I plus b times the norm of I plus b inverse submultiplicativity. And I can further upper bound this by using triangle inequality and say that this is norm of I plus norm of b times norm of I plus b inverse. So we got one part already. Norm of identity is equal to 1. So that means norm of I plus b inverse is greater than or equal to 1 over 1 plus norm of b. And similarly for the second half, again I is equal to I plus b times I plus b inverse, which I can write as I times I plus b inverse plus b times I plus b inverse. And now I take norms. Rather, I'll actually bring this to the other side. And so I plus b inverse is equal to I minus b times I plus b inverse. So now I take norm on both sides. I plus b inverse is equal to the norm of this quantity, I minus b times I plus b inverse. Again, triangle inequality, norm of I and submultiplicativity for the second term, norm of b times norm of I plus b inverse. Now I take this to the other side. So that means 1 minus norm of b times norm of I plus b inverse less than or equal to 1. So just take this to the other side. This is greater than 0. So you can take this to the other side. So norm of I plus b inverse is less than or equal to 1 over 1 minus norm of b. So that concludes the proof. So that's all we have time for today, and we'll continue again on Friday.
So can I ask a doubt?